Welcome to Advanced Data Analysis 1 with me, Erik Erhardt, Professor of Statistics at the University of New Mexico. In this video, I'll help you make the transition from Markdown to LaTeX for our poster presentations. So here we are at the website. I'll just scroll on down. So we will be working with, at the top of the timetable, I'm going to use the RMD file here as a starting point. I also have the bib file and the edit rules. We'll need those. At the bottom of that document, I have organized the sections of the poster. And at the bottom of the website, we have the poster template here. So we'll need the RNW file, the style file, and the logo. You're going to supply your own .bib file. And at the end of this video, we will have completed the example poster, which I've provided here. A helpful document is these translations, Markdown to LaTeX, and we'll look at that in 1 second. Also, we have a poster rubric that we'll be using on the day of presentations to assess each other's presentations. So let's look at the translations first. I've already opened the tab here. It's just a text document. I'll zoom in a little bit. So converting from Markdown to LaTeX for the poster. And I have a few steps here. The first step is we're going to need to export our source code from the RMD file so that it creates just a .r file. It will be one file that includes all the code from your homework file. And then we will import that by running source. So here is from the R console. I'll show you the code to do this, but effectively we have been running knit all semester by clicking the button at the top of the RStudio program. You can also Perl, and Perl reads through the RMD file and creates just the R code, a file with just the R code. So we're going to do that. That's going to create this file that has .r on it. And in LaTeX, in our poster template, we're going to run source on that .r file, and it will run all the code. And what that allows us to do is use all of the code from the Markdown file as the starting point in the poster, and then just run the few select things in the poster that we need for plots and numerical results. So that's the first thing we're going to do. The second step for you is to, one block at a time of either text or code, move it from your RMD file, your homework file, to the RNW file, that's the poster. Change it from Markdown format to LaTeX format, and then compile it. Do that for one small part at a time to make sure that the changes you make each work. It will be a debugging nightmare if you try to do everything. Click compile, it doesn't compile, and then you've got to hunt down what broke. If you do one piece at a time and it stops working, it was the last thing that you did. And the last thing to worry about once everything is in your poster is worrying about figure sizes. So I'll let you read through this at your leisure on the website. Below, here's a few translations or differences between Markdown and LaTeX. For example, in Markdown, for code chunks, in Markdown, when you run a code chunk, we've got the triple backtick with R, and there might be some options there. Then you'll have your code, and then the triple backtick ends it. In LaTeX, it's slightly different. Instead of the triple backtick open curly brace, we have a double less than sign. And then in LaTeX, it requires that you have some unique name for each code chunk. So if you want to name it, t-test or plot underscore histogram, that will work just fine. Then we've got our options, and then it ends with the double greater than sign and then an equal sign. Then you put your code, and when you put an ampersand, that's the end of your code chunk. For citations, instead of the left square bracket, ampersand, and then the reference name separated by semicolons, LaTeX uses /cite, and then you name your references without that ampersand, just separated by a comma. For lists, there's several ways to do lists in Markdown. We've seen numbered lists where you just start 1 period, 2 period, 3 period, and so on. In LaTeX, you actually need to begin and end a list environment. And so itemize is one of those where you just get dots or triangles for each item. So you have to say begin itemize and end itemize, and in between /item gives you basically the bullet point, and then you can type your list item there. For bibliography, we remember at the top of our Markdown file, in the YAML, there is a line bibliography : and then the bibliography name. In LaTeX, we're going to specify the panel in the poster where we want the bibliography, and we'll have /bibliography open brace and then the bib file name close brace. So a lot of this is pretty similar, but you just need to know the context or the syntax. If you want to print values in the text like p-values or the number of observations in a data frame, which is what I'm doing here, in Markdown we had single ticks to start and end a little expression in text. We need the R there so that Markdown interprets it, and then nrow is the command to run. So if this had 40-something thousand observations, we get the number there. So we could write a sentence that says our data frame has, put this in, it says 40-something thousand, and then you continue the sentence, observations in the data set. In LaTeX, it's slightly different. Recall that R is a more modern version of a program called S, and John Chambers wrote this back 20 years ago or so. And so this is an S expression. And so that's going to run, R is going to run anything that's in /S expression with those braces. So this does the same thing as in LaTeX. If you want to highlight a variable name in the text and have it show sort of in courier or fixed width font, we were doing that in Markdown by just surrounding it by single ticks. In LaTeX, that you need to put it into a verbatim environment, and one way to do that is /verb pipe. That's the vertical line with the shift key for your backslash above your enter key, and then you can put the variable name, and then you can end it with that symbol as well. Last thing is for quotes, LaTeX will render your quotes in a very particular way. So for example, if you want this little phrase begin and end in quotes, and you want these left quotes to appear like left quotes where they curl toward the word begin, and then the end quotes to curl toward the word end, sort of like if you put your two pairs of pointer and middle fingers up and you curl towards your body, down and towards your body, that the LaTeX requires you to actually do 2 left ticks and 2 right ticks to specify that. Okay, that is such a minor point, it's hardly worth making, but there you go. So let's get started. So in class, what we did was started off by compiling our poster. So I'm going to show you, I created this new folder in my computer called temp, and I just put all the stuff I need for my poster. So this is a minimal directory for this. I have the homework project. This file here has all my homework assignments in it. Here's the poster template, and here's my final poster, Professor Erhardt. Okay, my homework requires the edit rules and the bibliography. Oh, sorry, but not that bibliography, this one, nisark.bib. The poster requires the UNM logo and the Beamer theme unm.sty for a style file. And right now the basic template requires bib.example just to run. So those are all the files here. Let's start by making sure that our poster template compiles appropriately. So I'm going to open up R here and pretend that nothing's going on. I'll even go over to my environment area and delete everything including the hidden objects by clicking the sweep button. So nothing going on here. Alright, let's click open. Here's the temp folder. I'll go to the poster template in portrait format and click open. I started thinking that we'd do posters in landscape format, but we just didn't have enough room in the hall where we were going to have the poster presentation for all of our posters to be wide. So we went to portrait orientation. Alright, I'm just going to blindly click compile. It's running the code chunks below. It's converting the LaTeX text file that it created into a PDF file. And there is our poster. Alright, so it has some meaningless stuff in here. We've got this analysis from the car dataset. This has been happening on my computer. Windows Explorer stops working occasionally. So at the top here we've got the title, which we're going to replace. We have the first and last name, which we're going to replace. And we're going to put in our department as well. And each of these little sections here, like introduction and then the items that are in that box, those are defined as little boxes within LaTeX. And we've got a title for that box, and then we have the content. And here we've got an itemized list. So those are some of the things that we're going to reproduce with our own content. Each of these week 2, week 1, these little those were just for me to show when are we going to work on these ideas throughout the course. We're going to get rid of those for our own posters. Alright, so I'm going to close that, go back to RStudio, and I guess I'll leave this poster open for a second. Alright, let's have to reopen my Windows Explorer window. How embarrassing, it closed on me. Homework. And the temp folder I created. Okay. So one thing we can notice after I compiled the poster is I had that RNW file that I compiled, and it created all these other files. In addition, it needs these for constructing the TOC, the table of contents. The .tex file is the LaTeX version that ends up being compiled into the PDF. There's maybe some navigation stuff. BBL is associated with the bibliography. The log file tells you if there were any compilation errors in there, and there's some others. So it's okay at some point if you just want the PDF and the RNW file to hang around to delete the rest of that stuff. Okay, so now we've got a version of the poster. If I open it back up, that's the poster we just created. All right. So let's make sure that my homework compiles, and as it's compiling we will discuss the next part. So open the project, the homework project. All right. And let's see, mine is about 3,200 lines long. Sort of remarkable how much work we've done this semester. And I'll just click knit HTML, and it will open up the R Markdown tab down here, and it will get working on compiling those code chunks. Now while it does that, I'm going to scroll down a little bit, and all semester long you've seen this chunk, or this commented out code that says ignore this. And it says Erik's compile commands in R. So I actually when I typically compile this, I will actually just copy and paste this into the R console, and it will compile this document. And there's just a few lines in here. The first is to assign the file name, and I'm going to have you basically modify this line at the top of your homework project, because maybe just by copying this chunk into your, it's not really a code chunk, just these commented lines into your own homework file, because this line Perl is going to create that .r file with only the commands in it, the R commands. So the first thing I'm doing is assigning just the file name of my RMD file. The second thing is I'm setting the working directory to where all my homeworks are. And for my own situation, I'm putting it into this temp file, but you've probably organized all your ADA1 work into a homework file folder. Okay, it's all done. So we'll come back to that in a second. Then I'm loading the knitter library, and then Perl. I'm going to Perl the RMD file. And I haven't done that yet, but I will in 1 second. So let's take a look at the poster. Let me resize this so it fits better in the recording window for you. Alright, so if I jump up to the top, there's my table of contents, and I'll scroll on down, and the last homework 13, week 13, complete poster and homework document, I'll click down there, and here's where I've organized the introduction. I've got two basic sets of statements I want to make with citations. I've got my research questions, which I just say the goals of the analysis include answering these two questions, and I list those two questions actually as questions with question marks. Then I discuss the methods. So I have a description of the data sources right here, the variables used, depression, smoking, tobacco, and then what the statistical methods are. So I'm using a t-test, two-sample t-test, and I've got a chi-square test for a contingency table. Then I skip the results because they're going to be in my right-hand column of the poster, and then come down to the discussion, and I discuss what the relationship between the analysis that I conducted and the literature, and then what the future directions are. So we can extend the focus from young adults to all adults and ask some more complicated questions. I'll have the references then. And finally, the results column on the right has two sets of analyses. The first is a two-sample t-test, so I ask my hypothesis question: is the population mean number of cigarettes different for depression or no depression, those two groups? And I conduct the t-test. I've got some additional plots here for the checking assumptions, which I don't include in the poster, but I do state that the model assumptions are met. And then I've got some evidence, what the p-values are and what my conclusion is about rejecting the null, and then a comment about what the size of that difference was. And then the second question, I've got the contingency table. So I discuss whether the model's assumptions were met. Oh, here's my hypothesis question. Is there an association between these two variables? Assumptions are met. Here's the evidence, the p-value and the test statistic, and my decision about rejecting the null. I think underneath I have an interpretation that the primary cause was that in my case, I've got a Hispanic ethnicity that had fewer people being dependent on nicotine than was expected by chance. And so that's the primary finding for me. And then finally, the references. So those are the parts I'm going to put into the poster in a moment. So before that, though, let's look at the directory here. so notice, given this name, the homework file dated 11/18, there's no .r file. There's an RMD file, and there's an HTML file, and there's a couple folders that holds the cache and any of the plots and other results. And so I'm going to run these 4 lines, setting the file name, setting the working directory, library knitter, and then going to purl the file name. And when it purled the file name, it processed the file, and the output file was .r. So now if we go back over here, here's the .r file. It's 60K, and we can open that up in RStudio and take a look at it. And this represents all of the code in all the active code chunks in your file with comments. So I start with some knitter options, library PDS, the dimension of NISARC, that's where my data set, right, my variable list, renaming variables, all the familiar stuff. And if I control end all the way to the bottom, I've got almost 1,400 lines of code. Mostly comment, but that's a lot of work over the entire this semester. All right, so what we want to do in our poster is, and I'm going to bring us to the finished product for now, the one I worked on last night. And show you what the finished product looks like, and then we'll step through some of the small details. And maybe I'll do that in a second video. All right, so I'm going to open up my RNW file for the poster, the completed poster, and show you some of the things that I changed here, and then I'll do a more detailed video of the small details that were required. So I didn't change anything from the top. I'm going to scroll down. All right, here's some details I changed. /title, I put my title in there. Smoking behavior is almost associated with major depression. I put in the author's name, it's me, and then I changed the institute. I filled in the Department of Mathematics and Statistics. Now, I've added this code chunk, and this is the key to this. I've got a source. Actually, what I recommend is if you go to the website and go down to the poster stuff, if you look at this RNW file for my example poster, in fact, I'll just open that right now. Okay, I'm going to scroll past all that stuff, and here, add your homework files star.r file from Perl here. So I want you to copy these lines of code, and I want you to specify your folder where your homework file is, and I want you to specify the name of your .r file. And notice all the options. It's going to cache this once it runs it, because when you run these lines, when you run source, it actually runs all of the code. So that might take a minute or so on your computer. So once it's done, we want to cache that result. I'm not going to allow any comments. I'm not going to echo the code. I'm not going to show any messages or warnings. I'm going to hide the results. And I'm not going to include any of the results that it produces. Basically, I'm going to run all the code so that RStudio has all the variables in memory, but I don't want it to produce any output. I just want to have all the variables so that I have access to those variables later on in order to produce plots and so on. All right, so let's go back to here. In fact, maybe what I'll do is I'll just compile this, and we'll see the first code chunk it's going to get to is here, and it's going to walk through those many hundreds of lines of code. So I'm going to compile the poster, and this compilation looks just like it did when I clicked knit back on the original homework. Except it doesn't have the progress bar. Alright, finished running everything, producing the PDF, and there's my PDF. So it's got my title, my name, I put demo poster on there, my department, and it has all those things from my homework organization of the poster. It's got my research questions, it's got those plots on the right hand side, and in the bottom left I've made the text here really tiny for the references, because if people want the references, they can step up to the poster and they can read it. They don't really need to see those at a distance. Alright, so I will end this video here and start a second video for all the nitty-gritty. The second video basically will cover these ideas. We'll be looking at the homework document, and if I jump down to the bottom of the homework document, alright, homework 13. So here's the title. Section 1, Introduction. And what I have in the Markdown file is basically a small bulleted list. I have the first bullet, smoking behaviors associated with major depression, and then I have 2 bullet points under that. If we take a look at that in the HTML file, there's the introduction, and there is the first bullet and the 2 sub-bullets. So we want to convert that to this in the PDF. And maybe I'll just do this one and then I'll stop the video. So if we go over to the poster, close the scroll down, and I'm going to show you the basic structure of the poster. First thing, we have a begin document. That's the entire poster, right? So there's all this header stuff up here that tells you we're going to use Beamer, which is a presentation document class. We're going to use the theme that I worked to create for this poster. We're going to have a certain size of the poster and portrait orientation. We're going to use a natural bibliography format. Let's see. Then we've got this header information, which I talked about before, the title and author and so on. Then the document begins. And at the very bottom of the document, I'm going to go down to the very bottom, line 336, there's an end document. So each environment in LaTeX has a begin and end. Alright, so now I'm going to go back to the top and scroll down. Alright, so there's the begin document. Then I've got columns. Okay, so the first column is on the left, and there's some of the knitter commands for running the .r file and some other options which basically just make sure that your poster doesn't have warnings and errors print out on it. Alright, column 1. So it says that the column is 49% of the line width. So there's a little tiny thin margin between the 2 columns. Alright, then we have blocks. So here, begin block, introduction, and then I'm going to scroll down a little bit and find the end block. There's the end block. So between those two, begin and end block introduction is the block on the poster, which is this introduction block. And so if you end up deleting one of these begin or end blocks, things break and it won't work. So be careful of those. So it says begin block, curly brace, and then we have introduction in curly braces. So if you want to change the word introduction to something else, I don't really recommend it, but you could do that. And that is what changes what appears in that gray header bar. Then recall from our translation comments here that we've got, oh, not there, here we go, poster conversion. I'm going to scroll down to those lists. So in Markdown you get stars, and in LaTeX you have begin and end itemize with /items. So if I go back to the poster, smoking behavior is associated with major depression. And then I have an itemized list that has 2 items, item 1, item 2. And in those I also have my citations. So you'll start by copying, or at least what I recommend, just copy and paste the Markdown version over to your poster and then edit away until you get it in the form that LaTeX needs it in. Notice the citations are /cite, and while over in Markdown it was the square bracket @ symbol and then names. Okay, so there's a little bit of work to do, and what I recommend is you do one piece, maybe just do the introduction, try to get all your itemized things correct, and then compile it. See that there's no errors, and then move on. Initially you will actually get an error right here because you don't have the bibliography. It won't be an error really, it will be a warning. So maybe this will be the last part of the video. Alright, so bibliography. Here's our bib file, nisarc, etc. litreview.bib. And in the poster, I'm going to scroll down to the references section. So here's the discussion section, further directions block, references. All right, so then I have /bibliography, and I need to put that .bib name here. I believe it works whether you have .bib on the file name or not, so it won't really matter. And notice end column, that's the end of that left-hand column. Column 2 is where the results begin. Okay, so once you've got your .bib file in here, then you can click compile, and aha, what did I just do? nisarc not found. So it worked before. Let's see, maybe it gives me an opportunity to do a little bit of debugging in front of you. So object nisarc not found from line 63 on the poster template. I think what I'm going to do, so when I ran that, it should have run. I noticed that over here on my right hand side in my environment, I only have that file name. I guess that's probably okay, because when I compile this, the PDF compile has its own environment, just like the R Markdown has its own environment. Let's see, let me try compiling it one more time. This is my poster. All right, so this is a good tangent. So when you're compiling LaTeX and you've got cache equals true, like here, so that's because I don't want this to have to run every time I compile this. It creates a folder called cache, and I'm going to go ahead and delete that folder and see if that helps my situation. I'll click compile, and I notice now that it's starting to run through. All right, so let's see if this works. This is going to work just fine. Oh, that looks like a fatal error. Oh, maybe that's because I have the poster open and it can't write to the poster that's open. All right, but if I click compile PDF, all right, so what I've just discovered for my own poster, at least on my laptop, is that cache equals true probably doesn't work. So I'm going to change that to cache equals false and compile it. This is a little annoying for me to have to wait for it to compile each time. And there's the poster. Okay, so what I've just discovered is that cache doesn't work for me for my poster on my laptop. It was working last night for me on my desktop. So, good. So hopefully that's not something you run into as a problem for yourself. All right, so those are the steps required for, the main steps required for getting your poster from Markdown to LaTeX.